Most people think jazz comping is all about learning tons of chords, but memorizing endless inversions won't get you very far. What you really need is a method that makes your chords flexible so that you can easily add rhythm, groove and riffs without memorizing hundreds of grips. Now this simpler, more musical approach is exactly how legends like Joe Pass played their chord solos and comping. And in this video I'm gonna show you how to turn just a few chords into great sounding music. The goal is to start with simple chords like these, add rhythm, melody and even passing chords to get something that sounds like this. And I'll use a basic B-flat jazz blues to teach you this. Let's start with the chords. You probably already know these 3-note shell voicings, but they're way more powerful than you think. For a simple jazz blues in B-flat, you only need 6 chords. So first you need a B-flat 7, then you of course also need an E-flat 7. Now the next one would be E diminished, and then you need a G7. And of course, C minor 7, F7 to take us back to B-flat. This isn't about learning tons of inversions and voicings. Instead, we'll use a few flexible shapes and focus on rhythm and flow so that you're not stuck solving some weird chord puzzle every time that you're comping a song. The first simple step is to add a bit of rhythm and also help you get used to the rootless versions of the shell voicings. That makes things easier down the line, and it also shows you just how powerful these 3-note chords are. This is easy to do and much more powerful than you think. A basic shell voicing has 2 parts. You can split it like this. For the B-flat 7 you have the root or the bass note on the 6th string and then the chord on the middle string set. And for the E-flat 7, here the bass is on the 5th string and then the chord is again on the middle string set. Now when you want to add more rhythm to your playing, you've got 2 parts to play with, low and high, and that lets you do something like this. With just this, you're already checking all the important boxes for comping. The harmony is clear, there's a groove, and you can react rhythmically to what is happening in the melody or solo. You could basically stop the video here and start gigging, comping horn players and singers, but I'll also show you how to add fills and passing chords to really take it further. To build your rhythm vocabulary, here's a simple exercise using the split shell voicing and just 1 chord. I'm using a B-flat 7. Start with bass and chord together. Then move the chord, move to the beat, further. This gets you used to hearing and feeling different places in the bar, and you want this to feel easy to play because that way you'll start coming up with more interesting rhythms naturally, and you'll get much more comfortable with the rootless voicings as well. But rhythm is of course only a part of the sound. To make your comping really flow, you also want to add melody to your chords. That's a huge part of what makes it sound musical. So let's explore that before we dig into a Joe Pass example. Thinking like this makes everything easier. Instead of jumping between complicated grips, you just change or add a new top note to the chord that you're already playing. That's it, and suddenly your comping has melody. On a B-flat 7, some easy options would be these. So you have the basic shell voicing with the D in the melody, and then you also have an F, a G, the 13th, or an A-flat, the 7th. And when you play these, then you still want to think of them as that basic B-flat 7 shell voicing, just with 1 note changed. That makes it easier to just focus on the top note melody and not think a lot of different chords. For the E-flat 7, you can keep it just as practical, only adding 2 top notes, using the rootless version as well. The basic E-flat 7, and then you also have the root in the melody, and the 9th. And with just that, you can turn the first 4 bars of the blues into this. Can stay super simple even if you're not that familiar with the chord. The basic version is this, and then you can just add 2 notes, the E and the G. And you can treat the G7 the same way, because what really matters is that it's easy for you to play and create melodies. So you have the basic shell voicing, and then the flat 9 and the sharp 9. Now combine that with B-flat 7 and E-flat 7 and you've got the next 4 bars of the jazz blues form. In the 2-5, So C minor to F7, you can see why Barry Harris' trick of just thinking about the 5 chord makes a lot of sense, because both chords share the same top notes. So E flat, F and G, and for F7, E flat, F and G. And that gives you the final 4 bars of the jazz blues. Now you have the chords to cover the entire form, so let's look at how Joe Pass works with this. And he adds a few new tricks to the mix as well. The examples that I'll show you here go a bit further than what we've covered so far, but the principle is exactly the same. Now, as I mentioned earlier, this way of thinking wasn't something that I was taught. I developed that by digging into Joe Pass chord solos, especially from his solo guitar albums. Now, one that I really love is Blues for Basie, a blues in G from the Virtuoso 2 album. Hot take, I much prefer the second Virtuoso album to the first one, mainly because of the sound. That ES-175 recorded with a microphone, that's just not what that guitar was made for. Here's what Joe plays on the A7 chord in the 3rd chorus. You can clearly see how this is built around the same shell voicing concept that we're using on the B-flat blues, because it's all coming out of this A7 shell voicing. But of course, he takes it even further, adding a melody note on the high E string. And that is also possible. Here he's harmonizing that with a rootless voicing, because that becomes a lot easier if you work with that. That's of course something that you also want to explore and add to your playing. And another great technique is something that he's illustrating on the 4 chord a little bit later in the solo. First, just notice that he's using exactly the set of melody notes that I showed you for the B-flat 7. Just moved up 2 frets. But the important thing to take away here is that he's also sometimes just letting the melody stand on its own. And of course, this is something you can use yourself as well. So you get where sometimes he's just playing the melody and then he's sort of adding the chords in as a sort of emphasis. And that's also something that you can add to your comping as a variation. Remember that passing chord that I used at the beginning of the video? Let's take a closer look at how you can use that in your comping too. A few wrong notes can sound amazing if you use them the right way. Passing chords are a great tool for adding energy and movement to your comping. In the blues, they can also bring out that bluesy edge in the sound. Now, this might sound like it involves some complicated theory, but it's all actually a lot easier than you think. Check this out. Here's how simple this really is. You just think about the chords that you're playing, so in this case like the B-flat 7, and then you just approach that from a fret above or a fret below. So on the B-flat 7, I'm first just playing shell voicing, and then I'm doing this, and I don't think about the passing chord as a real chord. It's really just where it's going. So I'm just thinking about this needs to move up here to my B-flat 7. And here it also really helps bring out sort of that classic blues sound, mixing the major and minor third. And on E-flat 7, I use a neighbor chord to bring out the blue note in a B-flat blues. So that's the E, right? You have that kind of sound. So I use a full chord for this first, E-flat 7, and then to get the E, then I'm using this passing chord, which of course is then moving up to an E-flat 7 chord that I already sort of have in my vocabulary. And that way it just really makes sense what's happening, both with the harmony and with the melody. And then I'm also using a full passing chord to go back to the B-flat 7. So we're going here and I'm using this chord to get there. So it's not about which chord you use as a passing chord, it's about how you slide or move back into the main chord that is in the song. And that movement is what makes it work. Now, having this kind of freedom with your chords, especially to bring out that blues sound, is a lot of fun. Now, if you want to go deeper into that sound, then check out this video where I break down my favorite Joe Pass jazz blues solo. He demonstrates this both in soloing and with chord. It's a unique but also important part of playing jazz. Check it out, learn jazz, make music.